Let's head on down into the bunker and try to survive the darkest day of horror the earth has ever known. Let's get into it. Hey, welcome back to the channel. Hope you're all doing well out there. Today we're going to talk about the darkest day of horror the world has ever known. But before we talk about that dark day, like, comment, and subscribe. Join me here. I greatly would appreciate that. Today we're going to talk about George Romero's Day of the Dead. Now, Dawn of the Dead was very successful, and actually the distributor of that film wanted a sequel right away, but Romero didn't want to rush into another sequel. He wanted to do a film called Night Riders with Tom Savini. Ed Harris is in that film, and then he wanted to do Creepshow. And then after Creepshow, he came back around to Day of the Dead. Now, Romero's original script was much larger in scope, a lot more action scenes, a lot more sets, but the problem was the distributor was willing to give him the $7 million that he figured it was going to cost to film that version of his script, but it had to be rated R. He was not willing to send it out unrated for that amount of money. And George Romero, being George Romero, he didn't want to water down his vision, so the distributor offered him $3.5 million and he can go out unrated, which meant Romero had to go back and revise his script, cut out a bunch of action sequences and rework it to fit within the $3.5 million budget, and that is the version we got, which is Day of the Dead from 1985. This film dropped on July 19th of 1985. It's an hour and 41 minutes long. It went out unrated, had a budget of $3.5 million, and upon release, it made only about a little over $5 million in America, but it did make worldwide around 30. So it did make some bucks worldwide, but it was not the success that Dawn of the Dead was. And George Romero wrote and directed this film like he did the other two Dead films up to this point. And in this cast, we have Lori Cordelia plays Sarah. She's a scientist in this bunker with some other scientists. And then we also have Terry Alexander, who plays John. He is the helicopter pilot for this bunker. Joseph Pilato plays Captain Rhodes, and he is awesome here. Jarlath Conroy plays McDermott. He is the radio guy in this facility. He's trying to work with outdated equipment, trying to get it to work. They've since lost contact with Washington, D.C. over quite some time. Richard Liberty plays Logan, aka Frankenstein, and he'd already worked with Romero on The Crazies in the 70s. If you've ever seen the original The Crazies, I like the remake as well. Gary Clark plays Steele. He is one of Rhodes's men, in this military situation. Howard Sherman plays Bub. He is a zombie that Frankenstein is trying to condition to not want to eat humans. John Amplas is in this film, and he's playing one of the scientists. John Amplas was in Martin. He was Martin in Martin, and he was in Creepshow. He played the Father's Day zombie that comes out of the ground. He'd worked with Romero a few times before, and he's here, and he's good in this role as well. Tom Savini did the special makeup effects. Greg Nicotero's in this film as one of the soldiers, but he also helped Tom Savini with some of the makeup effects. So was Howard Berger. They would go on to create K&B effects later on. John Volich worked on the effects team. This is considered, and even Tom Savini considers this his makeup effects masterpiece, and it is certainly that, and we'll talk about it. This film opens up in Florida. Fort Myers, Florida is where they shot the opening of this film, and it definitely sets the tone and the mood for this film. We see these desolate streets. We see cars parked, burned out. We see an alligator. We see all this stuff. Nobody's around, and this helicopter lands. Lori gets out along with her boyfriend Miguel, and they start calling over this loudspeaker or megaphone to see if anybody's alive that they could help and take back to their facility. And all of a sudden, all these zombie hordes come out of the buildings and start marching towards them, and they realize it's a dead place. They get back in the helicopter, go back to their bunker. They land on their pad, go down into the facility. And that's where we're introduced to the rest of our men. We're introduced to Rhodes, to Steele, and all these other guys, and the ins and outs of how it works, and Frankenstein and that. And here we find out they've been there for quite some time. Now, after Dawn kind of night started this epidemic of these zombies, the dead coming back from the grave to eat humans. Dawn furthered the story where the shit was hitting the fan and people were panicking, but we were still kind of in control. We were in the majority. This film is definitely the bleakest of the three by far, because basically this is end times. Like, they don't know how many people are left, but they've lost contact with DC. They haven't heard from them in quite some time, and they haven't found a living soul in a very long time. And it's just them in this bunker, this small group of scientists, We got John, the helicopter pilot. We got McDermott, the radio guy, and a bunch of soldiers, and that's pretty much it. And they're running low on men, running low on just ambition at this point because nobody's getting paid, nobody's getting orders. Rhodes is pretty much the only one giving orders. They're not getting orders from DC at this point, and the scientists were put together in a hurry and put in this place to try to figure out how to stop this zombie apocalypse, and they have not reached any conclusions on how to stop it. The closest one is Frankenstein. He is trying to train the zombies not to want to eat human flesh, and he has one in Bub, who Howard Sherman gives a great performance as Bub, and it's a very interesting idea for sure. Romero definitely, he portrays it in a way that it comes off as not cheesy. It actually works in context with this film. But when we meet these folks and they go back to the facility right in the beginning of the film, we already see the cracks of their sanity, of the group is not jiving anymore. We're storming here in North Carolina. It's perfect to do a review for Day of the Dead, I guess. They're not jiving anymore. The military folks and the scientists are not getting along as well as they once were. Rhodes is definitely very combative. At this point, you see a guy who probably at one point had the right, he was trying to do the best he can, but at this point, his superiors passed away, so now he's in charge. He's a chip on his shoulder, but also even his sanity is being stretched to the breaking point because they've been stuck in this bunker for however long, and you can tell these people don't really like each other. It's like getting stuck somewhere for a long period of time in close proximity with a bunch of strangers you don't know, you end up not liking. It's not like getting stuck somewhere with some really good friends that you've known for a long time or family members that you really love and enjoy being around. This is a bunch of people that are basically strangers that got jammed in a situation. They've been there for a very long time, and the relationships are breaking down we see it. It's already in progress when we meet them, but just deteriorates from there. This is definitely the darkest of the three, but as we go along, things go from bad to worse. Some of the men get killed, the military men get killed. Rhodes is starting to push his authority even further and further. We see that in the scene where they're having a meeting and he threatens to shoot Sarah as she gets up to walk away, and he's serious about it. He tells Steele to kill her, and he thinks he's joking, and he points the gun at Steele and says, if you don't shoot that woman, I'm going to kill you. And Steele gets up, and he's going to do it because he's a soldier. He's just following orders, which is, in this situation, is never a good excuse for what he was about to do. Thank God he doesn't shoot her, and she sits down, but the tension keeps rising between the groups, and it ends in a display of violence as he kills Frankenstein when he realizes what Frankenstein's doing by he's butchering his men that are dying and feeding them to Bub to keep him, not wanting to eat human flesh or come after them. He doesn't get agitated when they enter a room like most of the zombies do. And he kills him. He puts Sarah and McDermott out into the pens where they keep the zombies for the specimens. And John eventually has to escape from Rhodes' clutches. He wants John to fly them out of there in the helicopter and leave them behind. And John gets Sarah McDermott. They get out up to the helicopter and they take off for an island. In the meantime, we see some of the goriest effects Tom Savini's ever done as we see Rhodes and his men get tore apart, although Rhodes is saved for last as he's screaming choke on him as he's getting torn apart and his intestines and his stomach are just falling out of his body. And that is pretty much Day of the Dead. We kind of get a happy ending with Sarah McDermott and John on a beach on an island somewhere. But this is definitely the darkest of the three, where Dawn of the Dead, while it had its dark moments, it was more of a romp. It was a fun movie. There was a lot of fun things with them in the mall and discovering like there's arcades, there's all this stuff at their fingertips now that they have the mall under control. And there's a lot of fun things. We get that action sequence at the end with the bikers coming in and they had to fight them off. It's a more fun movie, and I can see why that one did so well. It's gory, yes, and there's some dark moments, but it's a really fun and almost like a comic book movie. Where this one's definitely much more serious, much more darker in tone, not as pleasant. There's not as much comedy. There's a few comedic moments, a few laughs here and there, but for the most part, this is razor straight, deadly serious. And the actors here, the acting is definitely upgraded in this film. There's a bunch of things that are upgraded in this film. Well, I like the actors from Dawn of the Dead. Some of the acting is not the greatest. Even though I love that film, I think it's a classic. It's a masterpiece of the zombie genre. There's definitely issues with that film, from some of the makeup on the zombies and to some of the acting. All that gets fixed here. The acting is way better here by everybody across the board, and the makeup effects are fucking spectacular. Savini definitely upped his game, and he had a great crew behind him. But at the end of the day, this was Savini's show, and this is definitely, in my mind, and he's done a lot of great things in the makeup effects world. This is his masterpiece, and even he thinks so as well. I mean, the zombie makeups are flawless. The gore effects look fantastic and disgusting, like they should, and it's just a fantastic effects-filled movie. Overall, I actually like this movie better than Dawn of the Dead, even though I think Dawn of the Dead's a masterpiece, and it's a classic, and I love that film. And I used to watch that one more than this one. As I gotten older, Day of the Dead's actually become my favorite. I think it's a superior film on every level, from the filmmaking, the production aspect, production design, the effects, the acting, everything across the board. The story here, I love the seriousness of it, the dour tone of it all, these factions, these groups within the compound just not getting along, and seeing the breakdown between humans not being able to survive and just be happy with what they got. And I can see from Rhodes' point of view, Rhodes is definitely not a nice guy. But he probably was a patriot at one point. He was a gung-ho to be in the military. And now he's the only authority there. His boss died. They haven't heard from Washington in a long time. He does seem to care about his men at first, although he's willing to kill Steele if he doesn't shoot Sarah, which is fucked up. But I think he thinks he's doing the right thing at this point. And when Sarah pushes his authority, he goes total authoritarianism on her, and he's becoming a tyrant, and he's dangerous because he's almost insane at this point. But at the end, though, when he's faced with his own mortality, when the zombies infiltrate the facility because Miguel lets them in, he just leaves his troops high and dry. So in the end of the day, he's a piece of shit. But Joseph Pilato gives a great performance here. Yes, he's chewing the scenery, but it's all in the best kinds of ways, and I love his performance here. I love everybody's performance here pretty much across the board. I think Richard Liberty is great as Frankenstein, and he seems to be the only one of the scientists, even John Amplis, even though he seems like a pretty easygoing guy in this movie. Out of the three scientists left, Frankenstein's the only one that can talk Rhodes down off the ledge. Like when he's being bombastic and threatening, I don't know if because he throws all the scientific shit at him and he kind of makes sense. And I think Rhodes looks to Frankenstein as the last hope of maybe reversing what the hell's going on outside. But once Rhodes sees what he's actually doing, it's over, and he doesn't give a shit if they live or die. And that's why he shoots. Well, Frankenstein was doing some messed up stuff, but deservedly, Frankenstein deserved to get killed after what he's been doing. But I mean, Rhodes is not a good guy. I'm not trying to make him out, but I could see his point of view with what's going on and everybody's sanity to the breaking point. Because at this point, they're not getting paid. For all they know, everybody else is dead in the world. Even Frankenstein makes the comment during the one meeting that, by his calculations, we're outnumbered 400,000 to 1, which is almost impossible numbers to overcome at this point. So that would definitely fray on your psyche. And when we meet these men, they're already hanging on by a thread. And Romero does a great job showing their descent as the film goes along, even though we're dropped right in the middle of their struggle at this point. And I just love this film. Now, this film, all the underground stuff was filmed in the Wampa Mines outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Romero had toured there at one point, he says in the documentary on the Blu-ray disc from Screen Factory, that he liked that location. They were able to utilize it, and they use it for storage, actually. They store all kinds of documents down there, movie reels down there, because it's always 55 degrees and it's a perfect place to store stuff. And they got to shoot down there. They were down there for like 3 months. And the stuff in Florida was, Fort Myers was the opening scene in that town. They dressed it up to look like that, like a desolate zombie wasteland. And we get that famous newspaper shot where it says The Dead Walk, which they put in Resident Evil. Paul Anderson paid homage to it in Resident Evil, where Alice comes out at the end and you see the newspaper. Now, next week I will do Land of the Dead, but for today, Day of the Dead, I'm going to give 9.75 out of 10. I like this film that much. 9.75 out of 10 for Day of the Dead. Have you ever seen this film? Leave a comment down below. Let me know. Hit the thumbs up, hit the subscribe button, share this video. I really would appreciate that. I hope you're all doing well out there, but until next time, I'm just going to leave you with bye.